When I look at the Trump Nelk Boys thing or with Lex Friedman or whatever, he's lying out of his ass and misstating facts and figures and nobody's fact checking it, but it doesn't matter. He hung out. It was primarily unscripted, and it just seems like a better group to be a part of than the one that Kamala Harris was offering.
Yeah, look, it's the new who would you have a beer with
Yes.
measure.
In today's video, David Pakman absolutely destroys Chris Cuomo in a heated debate on the Democratic Party. While Cuomo tries to toe a neutral line, Pakman comes in with a reality check and facts to back it up. They dive deep into how the right wing absolutely mastered social media, turning platforms into propaganda machines, while Democrats stayed stuck, relying on outdated legacy media strategies. Pakman calls out the Dems for being slow to adapt, failing to control the narrative, and underestimating how powerful online influence has become. So let's dive in and watch how David Pakman shuts down Chris Cuomo in this heated debate.
But remember, that's all secondary to economic realities. And where the Democrats have lost traction, and this is a really interesting challenge for your generation of, let's say, of thought leaders, okay, is you guys don't come from the campaign experience. Most of you don't even come from the reporting experience. So you are in the ideas business. And the reality of politics is persuasion based on practicality. So people don't give a shit how good Trump is with Theo Von if they can't pay their rent. And if he's on the right side of their rent, then they don't, again, care how he is. Biden's problem was he owned the status quo, and the status quo was lacking from a price economy perspective. Now, there were plenty of reasons.
Let me ask about that, though, Chris.
Go ahead.
Because I think I agree that the perception of the economy hurt Biden.
Yes.
But let's start not with the perception. Let's start with the reality. Which economic metrics would you point to say that under Biden, things were not good?
Rate of inflation. That became the metric.
Down to 2.9% by the end of Biden's presidency.
Right, but what does that mean? That the rate of increase in prices had slowed. Yes. I want prices to go down, not to go up more slowly. You lose on that analysis.
So let's dig into that. This really is my background, economics. If you start to see prices going down, what would be the rational consumer decision with regard to purchases? If you say prices went down, what are you going to do now?
Buy more.
Why?
Because prices are lower, and I'm a consumer.
But if you expect prices to continue down, the rational economic actor would say, I'll wait till things are even cheaper.
Not in America. But I agree with you. In terms of an indifference curve, yes. But in terms of what we do, remember, there's something you have to build into this that isn't semantics, and I'm not just playing one finance background to another, is Americans overspend more than any other developed culture. Our reliance on credit is crazy. So most people, you're right, David Pakman's right. When prices go down, you stay on the sidelines and you wait, and the trend is your friend. But in America, they buy themselves all the way down and they buy themselves all the way up because they're borrowing most of the time that they're doing it. And that's why they're so price sensitive.
The point I'm trying to make, Chris, is in a country like the United States, and with an economy as mature as ours, to see raw price reductions, you only really see it when the economy is in disastrous shape.
Chris Cuomo raises a fair point about how Americans feel the economy, especially when prices are high, but Pakman steps in with a much-needed dose of clarity. He points out that inflation dropped to 2.9%, which is a strong recovery from where it was in 2022, and that's not nothing. Historically, once inflation cools, wages catch up, and that's exactly what we started to see. Median real wages rose in 2023 and early 2024, but you didn't hear much about that on your average cable news segment or TikTok doomscroll. Why? Because the right was out there dominating the narrative with vibes and virality, not facts. Pakman is also right to push back on the idea that prices didn't go down, so the economy must be bad. prices rarely drop significantly in stable economies. What matters is whether wage growth outpaces inflation, and under Biden, it actually started to. But the Democrats didn't hammer that message home. They were too busy hoping voters would magically feel better while right-wing influencers were out there telling people how to feel constantly. This debate shows exactly why the left needs to stop assuming that reality speaks for itself. Because in politics, perception is everything, and if you're not shaping the narrative, someone else is. Pakman's warning is clear. Unless Democrats start meeting people where they are, online, emotional, skeptical, they're going to keep losing, not because of their policies, but because they're losing the story.
And
Fair
so I
point.
think that, again, it's perception. When we would go and ask Trump voters at a rally, what do you want to see with prices? And they go, I want nominal prices lower than before the pandemic. They don't realize if that happened, we would be in an economic collapse, the
Right.
likes of which you can't imagine.
100%. But you are, this is your post-truth point. But it's always been true in politics, which is perception beats reality.
I agree.
And when you are the insurgent, you attack the status quo. And
Yes.
Trump, what's his name? Reagan's guy came up with the best deceptive metric in history. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? How? How could you be better off than 4 years ago when everything keeps getting more expensive? It was always a really convenient metric, but it works in politics. And the real reason that Biden lost was he couldn't explain it away. And that's
I agree.
a big thing in politics.
I think my point is, I agree with you that the perception of the economy killed Kamala Harris's campaign. I challenge the notion that it was the reality of the economy, but I agree that it was the perception. And it was also the perception that there was not a serious handling of crime and immigration. Reality, crime rate continues to decline in the United States. On average, Oklahoma City is more dangerous than New York City. The state of Oklahoma is more dangerous than the state of New York, right? So those are the facts. Doesn't matter. When it seemed as though Harris was not taking it seriously, it hurt her. And perception is greater than reality.
Chris Cuomo makes a solid observation about Reagan's old line. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Still being devastatingly effective. Even if it's totally detached from economic nuance, and Pakman, to his credit, doesn't fight that logic. Instead, he redirects it with actual data. Inflation has cooled, wages are up, crime is down nationally, and yet voters feel like everything's spiraling. That disconnect is what Democrats keep failing to close. Pakman brings the receipts. New York is statistically safer than Oklahoma. Crime is declining in major cities, and yet the public believes the opposite. Why? Because the GOP and right-wing media have mastered the emotional appeal. Fear sells. Crisis sells. And if Democrats don't match that with effective storytelling and relatable messaging, then yeah, perception will absolutely continue to beat reality. It's not about denying people's feelings, it's about bridging the gap between what's true and what people think is true. Pakman gets that, and it's why his commentary resonates. Democrats can keep winning policy arguments all day, but unless they win the narrative battle too, it won't matter come election day.
And whether it's you or Brian Tyler Cohen on the left, or Ezra Klein, you know, there are a group of, I think you guys are like the new cognoscenti, and you are up against guys who are all raw masculinity, even if they don't personify it. Like, you know, these guys, the big names on the right, whether it's Benny Johnson or Tim Pool or Tucker Carlson, I don't look at those guys and think alpha male. I do believe that they're right to fight for the alpha male. There's nothing wrong with that. It should be an inclusive thing. You can be any kind of man you want. There's no kind of man that's good. There's no kind of man that's bad unless you are bad to others. And then no matter what you are, you're bad. But you guys are brain versus brawn on some nominal level that I think is a false comparison, but that's what it is. And it's who can amplify message more. And how do you see yourself within that space, which I guess is an echo machine?
Well, I've talked about a lot of, this isn't in the book now, but in the last couple of months, I've explored how it has become that this sort of manosphere has become coded with messages that overlap with Republican ideology. And it doesn't make a lot of sense the way you're pointing out. A lot of it is traits that we didn't used to consider masculine, and now we do, and it's gotten all wrapped up. But part of it is, you've got to give them credit, they've seized on, there hasn't been a super coherent and attractive model of masculinity put forward by what we might call the left. Now, what the left is, I don't know, it's loosely defined. But I think the point that I made is, people like a Barack Obama or a Scott Galloway, I think, are very interesting models of masculinity from what we would call the left. But that is not really the way that it has been presented in media. And so if you're online looking for either workout content, or I want to start wholesaling real estate, or whatever, all this stuff that's big on social media, next thing you know, it's all coded with pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And then it's only one more step until anti-abortion. And then Trump's sitting there hanging out for 2 hours. That's the funnel. And it works really well, partially because the right is organized, but partially because the left hasn't put forward a good alternative model.
The right dominates alternative media spaces. It always has. It did with pamphlets, newsletters, radio, social media, digital media. Why? Magnified minorities. That's always been the sweet spot for people on the right. The question is, what is the counter for people on the left?
Well, you're forgetting one major reason why they've succeeded. I mean, if you go back to the start of talk radio and religious broadcasters, a lot of right-wing radio started with church stations. Those were funded by super rich national organizations that just said, start a local one, get a license. It's very similar to what's going on right now. We don't have Turning Point USA on the left. We don't have the Daily Wire on the left. The Midas Touch guys are growing very quickly, so maybe they could become that, right? But we just don't have that.
Now, Chris brings up this idea that the modern political battleground is brain versus brawn, or really ideas versus image. The right has cornered the market on alpha energy and has tied it directly to right-wing ideology, even when the so-called alphas are just guys with good lighting and a mic. And Pakman doesn't even dispute that. He points out that the left has failed to offer a compelling cultural countermodel, especially for young men. But where Pakman really nails it is in calling out how this messaging machine was built, with money and institutional backing. Right-wing media isn't about fire YouTube brands or viral tweets. It's a full-on ecosystem, bankrolled by billionaires and designed to win the long game. From the early days of talk radio funded by church networks to today's digital empires like the Daily Wire and Turning Point USA, they've invested in influence. Meanwhile, the left, it's a patchwork of independent creators with no centralized platform, often competing against each other for reach. There's no coordinated digital army, no billionaire sugar daddies funding local podcast networks or giving progressive creators the resources to scale. That's not a messaging issue, it's a power issue. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.